We get to look at now trinomials, and we're trying to see if that factors, which means, was there some product when we multiplied together that produced that? And I think we're going to discover that there is, because we have done these before, but we just done them in the other direction. We multiplied to produce this. Now let's start here and work our way backwards. So the strategy that I want just to help us to develop is a strategy where we're going to assume that these factor, which means that there is some beginning point, such as that, and where the first two terms in each of those binomials were an x. The reason why, do you remember FOIL? FOIL said first term times first term produces the first term. X times x produces an x squared. Do you remember what the last part of FOIL was? It was an L. An L said last term times last term produces last. So my constant here is 8. What are all the factors of 8? Well, I can make an 8 as an 8 times a 1, as a 4 times a 2, as a negative 8 times a negative 1, and a negative 4 times a negative 2. Those are all the ways to make a positive 8. So let's look at those pairs and see if they help us understand what happens. So I could write this one as an 8 and a 1. Because remember, first times first makes first, last times last makes last. You guys remember that, right? Let's look, and so I have 4 options to make this true. The other one could be x plus a 4 and an x plus a 2. Another one could be an x minus an 8 and an x minus a 1. And the last one is an x minus a 4 and an x minus a 2. All 4 of those sets follow both the F and the L in FOIL. First times first makes first, last times last makes last. But you remember FOIL wasn't just spelled FL. There's an O and an I in the middle. The outer and the inner terms helped us to determine what that 6x were, or that middle term. So now we need to do a combination of things to figure out which of these 4 is the right one. Well, if we multiply this out, x times x is an x squared. The outer terms, x times a 1 is a 1x. Inner terms is an 8x. And the last terms is an 8. Notice the x squared and the 8. We already knew that. But do the collection of the inner terms, x and 8x, make a 6x? No, they don't. So we know that this is not the correct factored form. Let's look at this one. First times first was an x squared. Last times last was an 8. Okay, what about the O? X times 2 is a 2x. The inner terms is a 4x. If we collect like terms, we notice that we do have a 6x as my middle terms, which is what I had right there. So that tells me then that this second listing is the correct way to factor x squared plus 6x plus 8. So when we try to factor a trinomial, we always start with building our parentheses. Put x's in those first terms. From there, we list all the ways that we can factor an 8. And one of those factors are also the correct factors that when we add up the middle terms, they'll produce that middle term. Yeah, you're right. We need to see more practice of this, don't we? So let's go.